Good evening, members. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. I will now read out the emergency evacuation announcement. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm activates, please leave the building in an orderly fashion via your nearest fire exit. The 2 fire exits through the partition doors are currently not in use due to ongoing works. Therefore, the fire exits are through the main doors of the hall or the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the roundabout, the island, in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Please switch off mobiles or turn them to silent. Toilets and hand washing facilities are available in the foyer. Members, when I invite you to speak, please ensure you have one of the microphones in front of you before speaking, as the microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. These are switched on, ready for you to speak, so you do not need to adjust them. Please make sure that the microphone is directly in front of you before speaking. Voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for, then against recommendations. Those abstaining from voting will be noted by officers. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies for absence have been received from councillors Mrs. Tony Carter, Andrew Cross and Michael Carter. Substitute members, Mrs. Christine Mason is substituting for Mrs. Carter. Mr. Newport is substituting for Mr. Cross. And that's it, yeah. Councillor Lawman isn't here. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. There are none. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of July 2022. Are the minutes agreed, members? Agreed? Agreed. Agenda item 5, to receive declarations of interest. There are none. Agenda item 6, Audit Progress Report 2022 to 2023. Mike Porter will introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
The report provides members of an update in terms of the work of the internal audit team progressing the audit plan for 2022-23 and the action taken by service departments in progressing audit recommendations. If I can ask members to turn to enclosure 1 of the report, which is at 6.4. In terms of delivering the audit plan for 22-23, we have completed a total of 2 audit engagements from the plan and further completed two grant claims which weren't identified in the original plan. The first quarter of the year is very much about finishing off the work from the previous year before we commence work on the housing benefit subsidy claim. Just to update members in terms of the work of the housing benefit subsidy claim, it's a significant piece of work which takes between 25 and 30 days of the audit plan available. I can also update members in terms of progress in terms of the HP subsidy itself. It's nearing its completion of the 42 claims we've required to investigate. 40 are now complete, so we've only got two claims to further look at, and we've only found 1 error to date. In terms of the plan itself and delivery of the plan, owing to staffing shortages, we are proposing a change to the plan in terms of the actual plan, in terms of taking out 60 days from the original plan that was agreed by members. As it highlights in the report, we're currently carrying 1.5 FTEs in terms of vacancies, despite a number of campaigns to recruit to the vacant posts. As yet, we've not been able to fill those posts. We are thus putting forward a number of best case, worst case scenarios. That will be highlighted 4 scenarios here in terms of further adjustment that might be required to the plan should we not be able to fill those vacant posts. We still have an advert out at the moment, and we're hoping to fill those posts by November. If that's not the case, we will come back to this committee highlighting what further changes we need to make to the plan. The report also highlights the work of service departments in implementing internal audit recommendations. There are a total of 15 live recommendations, and service departments are progressing well in implementing those recommendations. Since the report was produced, a further 2 recommendations have been implemented. The report also highlights the work of the compliance team based in Revs and Bens in terms of basically identifying fraud and the savings made from that work. As you can see from the report, significant savings have been made in relation to both council tax and business rates. In terms of the audits that were complete from the plan, we completed Transparency Code and Freedom of Information. We combined both those audits into a single audit review, which received an adequate assurance rating. In terms of compliance with the Transparency Code, we are compliant with the code in terms of the information we publish, and we also meet our requirements in respect of the Freedom of Information request. As noted in our report, we are sometimes outside the number of days allowable in terms of progressing those FOI requests, but those delays are not significant. I'm happy to take any questions in relation to my report.
Yes, can you tell me which the further 2 that have been finished since the report?
Yes. There's the asset management recommendation, number 1. The property inspection regime will be fully reinstated. This is now the case. That recommendation is being implemented.
Can you tell me what pages these are on?
6.24, number 6, yeah.
Asset management, number 1.
Yep,
So that's been completed.
that's been completed, yes.
Sorry, I just need to keep up with what you're saying. What was the second one?
The second one's the health and safety recommendation number 4.
Which is page...
Let's have a look. Find it, sorry. Bear with me 1 second.
Oh yeah, it's 6.23.
Sorry.
Oh, number 12, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got that. Councillor Mason.
I hope I get this right. Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions. Do you want me to take them in order or throw them all out in one?
No, one at a time, please.
Okay, just thought I'd warn you there are at least 2, maybe 3. I'd like to start with the report of item 6, and I'm interested in paragraph 3.2, which in particular refers to the necessary opinion of the Chief Audit Executive, or otherwise known as CAE, and that opinion is obviously pivotal. I also took note, as Mr. Porter drew to our attention, in closure number 1, and in particular the scenarios at 1.7, where we had have 4 scenarios around resourcing. I would like to know and be assured that in any of those scenarios, were they to occur, that there wouldn't be any difficulty with the CAE providing a good opinion.
Okay. If we're unable to fill those vacancies, there are other options available to us. So we can recruit accountancy firms to basically backfill those days. So in order to provide an audit opinion, we will look to basically complete sufficient audits for the Chief Audit Executive to provide an opinion. That might ultimately mean that we will have to buy in audit days from an external resource to provide sufficient work to provide that opinion. So if we cannot recruit, come November, that is what I will be tasked to be looking at in terms of actually what days can we buy in and who from. So we might have to go to the market in terms of finding an accountancy body that can deliver those days. But rest assured, we will provide sufficient resources and delivery of the plan to provide an opinion. The plan itself is risk-focused, risk-based. So there are particular audits, which we highlight as category 1, but need to be done in order to provide that opinion. So audits generally around key financial systems, risk and governance, are those ones that are key to provide that audit opinion. There's other audits that we may wish to carry out that are not so key in terms of providing that overall opinion in relation to risk, governance and internal control. So we will ensure that those key audits will be delivered for Rochester Council, and that may mean that we may have to go to the market to get those days bought in.
Thank you. I'll leave that question there until November. If we have hit some unfortunate scenarios, we'll obviously be looking to fund those additional costs in some way. So that will be a further issue to be considered then.
Yes, I mean, some of those costs will be obviously offset by the fact we don't have staff. So basically our staffing costs are reduced. So those reduced staffing costs, because we don't have to let those people in post, will be used to basically buy in those additional resources.
Can I ask my second question?
Yes, please.
My second question concerns the plan itself, and Mr. Porter just very helpfully engaged in the fact that the plan has to support the CAE's opinion. There is one area that I'm very concerned may not be included in the plan. The reason I say may not, it may have been referred to in a different way, a way that I haven't recognised. You may or may not be aware that the Council does have a list, a register of motions passed by the Council. I have a copy of that document, which I obtained through another member, asking the same questions as myself. And I want to ask why that's never been audited, because the risk that I have identified in reviewing that register is that the Council has not been progressing motions for some years. So I'd like to ask the question, is it in the plan? And if it's not in the plan, why isn't it? And can it be added, please?
It's not in the plan. The plan was agreed in consultation with senior officers. So the plan has been consulted on, and the items that are in the plan have been agreed both by senior officers and by this committee. So the plan was presented, I think it was back in March, to this committee. So at that point in time, members could have asked for further items to be added to the plan. It's not in the plan. The plan is flexible. All plans are flexible and they're risk-based. If we consider it a significant risk, and we would have to look into that, we could potentially put that in the plan and substitute that for another item. But we would need to understand the particular reasons or why we would want to include that in the plan, and then come back to you. So we would need to understand why that's now escalated into a significant risk, and perhaps why originally it wasn't put forward by either senior management or members to include in the plan. So the plan, as I say, has been discussed with senior officers, and it was presented to members back in March, I believe it was. So at that time, the questions could have been raised at that time. I mean, as I say, the plan is flexible, and so we can take a fresh look at the plan, because it's an emerging, evolving world. So, you know, new emerging risks do arise, and then those are the ones we can look at to include in the plan.
Can I come back on that, please, Chairman?
Yes, please.
I mean, there are two parts to my supplemental on that. Is what are the procedures that I should now adopt to have that item considered? And in the second, I wish to say I was not a member of this council in March. Having rejoined the council on election, I expressed an interest in seeing what the council had been doing for several years while I was on retirement, as it were. And on receipt of that list, I became aware of at least one, if not many, items that have never been proceeded. I regard that as a risk to the council. I regard it as a reputational and other risks. So could you outline for me, I've drawn it to the attention of the Chief Executive, I've drawn it to the attention of the Strategic Director, Mr. Summers, and I would like to know now how I should proceed to have that added to the audit plan.
Okay, in terms of adding to the plan, I think the procedure would be to discuss that with the chair, and essentially, if that's the agreement of the committee, and the committee feels that that is an item to include in the plan, then we could take a look at it. But it would have to be raised with the chair, and that would have to be the consensus of the committee to include that item in the plan. I'm not sure whether Naomi wants to add anything.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it would be helpful if we could take it away maybe for the head of the next committee and have that discussion internally and just check. But yeah, I would agree with Mike's assessment that I think it would come back to the committee to decide whether the plan's going to be amended, and I think that would probably be the appropriate form to bring it back to the next committee by the chair.
So that would be the next committee, it wouldn't be...
I don't think we'd
taking
make
it
any
into-
changes now to the plan
But
as it is.
the next committee, we could discuss that and
Yes.
have a vote on
Yeah,
it.
we can take that as an action for the next meeting.
Are you happy if we do that?
No, I'm not, Chairman, because I regard the failure to take forward important motions passed by the council as a significant risk. I have asked the Chief Executive since July to take urgent and significant action, and none has been taken. I have had to pursue this individually for the last 3 months. I'm not happy at all that the council isn't running reputational risk, which it should not be doing.
With your permission, Chair. I think we know what you're saying in your opinion, but I think, as you say, we need to take that back and agree it as a committee. So I don't think we'll be making any changes to the plan as it stands on
We
the ninth.
couldn't vote on it tonight.
I don't think it's appropriate. I think it's better to take it away and bring it back to the next committee meeting. Yeah.
Chairman, I'll make a proposal. I'll move a proposal. I don't think I'm using the correct terminology, but I'll move that this committee adds an internal audit of the motions register with utmost urgency, in particular deriving an action plan for motions to be pursued and performed and delivered.
I'm not quite, I don't know if Helen knows, but it's actually raised motions.
Is that legal?
You can.
Get a second.
I'll second it, John.
There you go. I'm good there, aren't I?
Can I just add in practical terms, obviously, even in theory that is added to the audit plan, I don't think it's going to be carried out before the next audit committee anyway, so I think in practical terms it's not going to make any real difference whether the decision is taken tonight or at the next meeting. So, and as I say, we haven't got absolute clarity about the governance process for raising that tonight anyway. I would just argue that in pragmatic terms it makes more sense if we, as I say, bring it back to the next committee for a decision.
But we have,
Chairman, I will second that motion.
yeah. Right, we have a motion on the table. Oh, you want to speak, Mrs. Mason?
I'd like to speak to the motion, if I may. I think when we are advised, as Councillor Mason has, of a reputational risk, and a great one, motions through the council, and the ones that we have been identified, I've actually drawn some of them to the attention of the portfolio holder. They're not motions just by other groups, they're motions by all groups. And if the council is going to the effort of making a political decision and saying it would do something, and the council has an agreement, and then years later nothing is done, that is a risk. And I do think this committee, one of the elements of this committee is risk assessment, and I think it should be looked at urgently and dealt with tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Mason. Well, we have no reason not to take this to the vote. So, oh, sorry, Councillor Gadsden.
I'm quite happy to take the officer's advice that as nothing will be happening over the next, between now and the next meeting, then, and if this has been going on for some time, and I do not see an immediate risk, although I agree with my fellow councillors that there are risks and we need to look into that, and reputational risks, and I totally agree with him. But I do think we need time as a
Point
committee.
of order, we're talking to the motion, and the councillor isn't talking to the motion.
Well, I'd like to say that I can't support this motion at this time, but I'm happy at the next meeting too.
Okay, anybody else want to speak? No. I'll take the vote. Can we vote for the motion, please? Against? That motion has been carried, so we would like that put onto the plan, please. Okay. Right. We'll carry on with questions on the report. Are there any further questions?
You finished?
I hadn't. But, Chairman, I wanted to thank Naomi in particular for arranging for further information to be provided to me on the Transparency Code and the FOI audit. Those matters that I have been looking at there don't affect the outcome of the audit, but again, it will be a matter I'm taking up with the Chief Executive.
Okay.
Thank you.
That wasn't a question, but thank you. Councillor Mrs. Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like a couple of points. One is a very small one. You say you've only picked up one error. I'm assuming it was an insignificant error and not a major one.
At this point in time, it's something that will be looked at by external audit. We just flagged that as an error raised in terms that it means an overpayment in benefit, which would result in a reduction in XP subsidy. But our results and conclusions are then checked by external audit. So there's a check on our work in effect to make sure we've got it right. So until they have concluded their work, we won't know the true extent of that fact. So
Yes. No, I think you've answered my question. It was basically a routine error rather than anything
Yes.
else. Thank you. And the other thing, I'd just like some clarity here in case I'm missing something, please, Madam Chairman. On page 6.6, item 3.2, it says a total of 4 recommendations, and certainly in the report it says, and I've lost it now somewhere, it says there will be training required on the Freedom of Information Act, and yet the recommendations only have 4, and the training on the Freedom of Information Act appears to have been lost, although I've lost the page where that was on. I'm sure the officers can find it quicker than me. Yeah, sorry, page 6.12. It says here, there appears to be no training currently provided to staff relating to FOI and EIR requests, formerly understood to be part of the HR corporate induction training, etc. A recommendation has been raised to address this, but I couldn't see the recommendation on the recommendations. So unless I'm missing something, can it be added on?
It might be an oversight on our part.
That's fine.
I would have hoped the recommendations would be there.
Councillor Milne.
I'll
sorry.
take that up with the officer. Yeah,
So
it's an
should
oversight.
we add that on recommendation 4? Thank you. That's just the only point. Thank you. I'm glad it wasn't me. Mistakes do happen. Thank you.
Councillor Milne.
Yeah, having had some experience of being on the receiving end of requests for freedom of information when I was in full employment, what is the process at RDC? Because we had, from my experience, we had training, and then you would receive to your desk something that was something to do with your work that may be part redacted before you get there, and then you're asked to comment on it. We were given 14 days in the model we had, but you had to have somebody supervising that, because we've got about 1 in 12 overrunning here, which is 40 out of, was it 555. It's not an insignificant number of sort of disgruntled people to be waiting on the receiving end of that for a reply. So that needs some governance, does it not? And that's what I was going to ask. What is the process? How do we monitor it, and who's responsible?
If I may, Chair, sorry.
Yeah.
There is a page on the council's website which, if you just search for FOI, it clearly states all the governance and procedures that apply to FOI, and it is obviously governed by legislation, and there is clear protocols and procedures about how we should be dealing with them, and we report on performance routinely on the council's website as well. So if you want to go away and have a look at that, and then if there's any further follow-up questions, I'm sure Angela, Laura and her team will be happy to answer.
It really was aimed more at the enforcement of all of those regulations to keep that number really low, because it can be really aggravating if we find we've got a significant number. 1 in 12 is considered the number of requests we get. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's what I was meaning. Not about the actual detail on the website. It's the actual physical follow-up to make sure they go out on time. And if they cannot, there has to be some good reason for it.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
I can just
okay.
take that. In terms of a process, if we can't meet the deadline, then the individual is notified of that fact that we can't provide that information. Usually they will go over that day because of the complexity of the information we've got to provide. So where there's a lot of information to pull back across a number of different service departments, it usually means we can't meet that 20-day deadline. So we would go back to the person who raised the request and say, unfortunately, we can't meet the deadline. Rest assured we will provide that information as soon as possible. So more often than not, you find the ones where they've gone beyond that deadline is because of the nature and complexity of information required. Ones where they're straightforward, we will meet that target. So based on our piece of work and the audit we did, what we found is where we missed the deadline, that is due to the nature of the work and the complexity and how much information we have to pull back. But what we found is the individual was always notified of the fact that we couldn't meet that deadline. So they're not left waiting or thinking, what is happening with my request? So they would be informed to say, yes, it's in hand, it's a lot of information, we can't meet that deadline.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you.
Yes, I'm just a little bit confused. Saying that freedom of information isn't on here, but on page 6.20, it does say review of arrangements for handling requests, all priorities, and it says it's completed. Is that...
On page 6.2, looking at the record, 6.12 refers to 6.2. It says, and it's missing, it says a recommendation has been raised to address this. The recommendation before this committee, there's 3 recommendations, and that one is missing. I think Mr Porter agreed that it has been omitted in error. And
I will take a fresh look at basically, so the 2 tie up. I haven't clearly missed to do the reconciliation between what the report was saying and the number of recommendations, but I will take that away and have a fresh look at that to make sure the 2 tie up, and that basically number X in the report tie up with the recommendation table.
so you don't want to add the recommendation on tonight? I thought that's...
I mean,
think
yeah,
that
I mean,
I think that would be
I
ideal.
will update it, yeah. If it's missing, I will update, make sure it's updated, yes. I will take that on board, yeah.
Well, we're presumably going to vote on these recommendations tonight, so we need...
The report's just for noting, so it's not,
Oh, is
it's
it?
not, yeah. So I will update the report and make sure it's basically correct.
Oh, sorry, I'd still like some clarity. It says it proposed that the committee resolves. That's not noting.
Yeah, it's proposed that it resolved that the plan be noted and that all the recommendations are to be noted.
Well, I'm reading 6.2. The recommendation is proposed that the committee resolves that the conclusions be noted at the update, but it doesn't mean the training is not on there, so we don't know if that was to be noted or implemented.
I will go back and make sure the recommendation, if it's missed and it's not, it's basically, I will ensure
Okay,
it's brought up to date.
So you just wanted it noted tonight, not implemented, not approved. Yeah, okay, no, that's fine. That's fine.
I will bring it up to date. I will correct it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Okay,
It's a
you
different
happy
way of
now?
looking at it,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, you happy now? Yeah.
Yes, thank
It
you.
is that all the recommendations are to be noted.
Yes, it was just the mission. I didn't know if it was to be noted or enacted. Thank you.
I will act on it. I will make sure it's correct.
Are there any further questions? No? We've got 3 proposals to be noted. Are we happy to take those en bloc? Yes? Right. So it's proposed that the committee resolves, number 1, that the update on delivering the 2022-23 audit plan, together with revised audit plan at Appendix 3, be noted. Number 2, that the conclusions and results from completed audit engagements in Appendix 2 be noted. And number 3, that the updated status of audit recommendations in Appendix 4 be noted. Those members in favour, can you please raise your hands? That is unanimous. You may lower your hands. Thank you, members. This concludes the business of the meeting, and the meeting is closed at 8:04 p.m. Thank you very much.